Welcome back to another episode of Phoenix Truth Rising Show. This is the Spaceman 2.0, here to point out the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So, part 15 from Here to Armageddon, and here's a little look at the back of the book. If you want to read, sorry for the covering up with that part. Okay, so with part 15 beginning, this is chapter 8. Recording with Ashtar, Tuesday, September 5th, 1989. So this is over 30 years old material. Ashtar to continue. The bad seed provides DBBs and ENTRÉ. Widespread is the influence which the DBBs have upon average individuals. It reaches from the depths of the depravity which is found in drinking and drug dens and brothels, all the way to the boardrooms of large corporations and the very highest levels of government. In fact, the more degraded and higher the probable influence, the harder and meaner the impact. It becomes totally integrated so that all facets play into the whole. In essence, what the DBBs are able to do is to bring to life the embers which were taken into each human being at the time when the gift of permanence was conveyed. This I have already covered. Because the gift entailed adding to each human entity part of the essence of one of the fallen angels, these same beings, now of the DB, are readily able to tune themselves to the vibrations of any human soul frequency that has allowed itself to be colored strongly by the negative qualities of the seed which was taken in at that formative birthing. Through this attunement between a human being and a DB, a magnification of the effect of that negative seed can take place. This is the origin of the concept that just as each human soul has its guardian angel, so too as has its own demon or fallen angel and or bad seed. Strictly speaking, this is not true, since the essence of a given one of the fallen beings is distributed among a large number of humans. The notion that a given human soul is more susceptible to the influence of one particular evil entity than of others is in general true, for the reason that I have now differentiated. When the plan to distribute fragments of the fallen beings among humans was adopted, it was expected that the human entities would strive to purify and cleanse the dark seeds that were then implanted. Many have indeed accomplished this purification, and such individuals are far less susceptible to the wide whisperings of the DBBs than are their fellows who have never attempted to eradicate the darkness within. An attempt to spur the human soul toward a particular action or thought which leads away from soul advancement, and which followed far enough, would lock that human being into a downward spiral from which it could not escape, is attempted. Violence, aggression, war, the Martian influence. I will now discuss violence, aggression, and loss of temper. In its ultimate manifestation, this category of influence brings war on a massive scale. It is not an inherent part of the human makeup as originally created to feel the hostility and hatred that are now seen so often in the world. These feelings have been introduced due to the combined effect of the dark seeds taken in at the time of the gift of permanence, together with the influence of the planet which man calls Mars. The red planet harbors an immense thought form of hatred and aggression, which can strongly overshadow thoughts and events on the earth whenever it comes to a close approach. These factors, spurred by the constant efforts of the DB to fan the flames of bitterness and hostility between men, have been sufficient to allow warfare and violence on an unprecedented scale to sweep over this earth. In some of your earth countries, notably Iraq and Iran, the hostile attitude has put its foul roots down into the very heart of the nation, darkening almost every citizen with its poison. This is little hope that the bloodshed and horror can be stopped in countries such as these. In actuality, some such countries will completely consume themselves. It will not be until the final death throes of the evil world system that those unfortunate lands will perceive the wrongness of their practices. By that time, however, it will most likely be too late to avoid destruction. Temptation. Next, let us speak of temptation. This relates specifically to the idea of self. While it was always intended that humanity should develop a strong and stable image of the self, there was never any intention that such development should lead to a permanent coldness between humans. Nor was there the aim to allow the selfishness now rampant on the earth to permit one soul to control or manipulate others for purely personal reasons. pride, haughtiness, and any manifestations of selfishness have developed only since men learned to think of themselves as better than others, more deserving, more powerful, or whatever, towards power, growth of self. Now you put the characteristics onto subliminal tapes and drizzle them into your subconscious to ensure they are nurtured. These attitudes poison relationships between souls and lead to permanent estrangement, producing a coldness and distance which can last over many lives in the joint experiences of souls who have allowed this to occur. Materialism, possession, and atheism. Now another big one, materialism. This is a very broad topic, but can basically be summed up under two headings: possession and atheism. The lust for material possession has been aided and abetted by the rich lifestyle of 20th century having and living, at least for countries in the West. However, even in the so-called have-not third world lands, there is a great desire for material possessions among those who have been exposed to the kinds of goods which were available in other places. This arises because in most instances, the souls who are born into the have-not countries are there because, among other reasons, they must learn not to covet material things for their own sake. When these individuals again see the kinds of goods that might be available, they rekindle the old covetous streak which they have brought over from a previous life incarnate, and they suffer because their desire to possess these things cannot be fulfilled. The idea that atheism is related to materialism may seem strange to some, but perhaps I can point out that the surest way to lose sight of the higher realities is to fasten one's attention onto the things of the earth to such an extent that one forgets the truth that the material plane is only one realm of experience. Compound that with the concept that perhaps there is no other plane of existence, and you have total materialism. If that goes further into belief that earth life is but a passing phase lived on a plane which is not really the home of the human race, or that it is all there is, you have no reason not to respond to the total material persona. If the mind becomes too obsessed with the things and possessions, there is a great likelihood that the truth of the spirit will be passed over and forgotten. For many souls, this is precisely what has happened. Your question should be at this point, how does one combat these categories of temptation? The answer is too simple to be adequately utilized. Love. It is love alone that can surmount the barriers of distrust and hatred which man has thrown up due to his violent and aggressive ways. I do not refer to anything in your vocabulary that is defined as love, nor of hardly any of your physical human activities, which, by the way, are almost totally satanic in origin and fulfillment. The solution. It is love alone which allows one to perceive that selfishness and the manipulation of others are not noble or spiritual paths to follow. It is love alone which can displace the lust for possessions in the mind of one who is caught in that dreadful trap. Only love can broaden the understanding to the point where the soul sees that the purpose of life is not to collect, but rather to give, not to hinder, but rather to help others, not to aggrandize the self, but to place it into the service of the creative forces that have made this realm of earth, man, and all the myriads of creatures which inhabit its many planes and sub-realms, the creation. Now, brothers, let us investigate how these traps are set for you. Getting at those on the path. There are numerous souls who instinctively know that there is a path, somewhere, a route, which, if followed diligently, will allow them to achieve spiritual progress and a true grasp of the meaning and purpose of life. However, these souls are not all of the same discernment. Many are very young in the sense of experience. Let us use an example which is a favorite of one of the koans, Hilarion. Hypothesize that a soul has had numerous lives of a rather common variety, living within the various traditions into which it has been birthed, adopting the bias of the environs, including all of the prejudices and narrow thought patterns, never stimulating fully the realization that life has a purpose entirely incongruous to that which conventional wisdom maintains. Then suppose that soul lives a recent life in which its experience is touched deeply by another person, someone who had this special awareness of the higher truths, someone who demonstrated the beauty and love which could be expressed by one who is on the path of spiritual advancement. In some cases, though Not all, the soul who had previously been following a conventional series of lives might suddenly become stimulated to struggle more diligently to climb out of the ordinary mold, to gain a far deeper understanding of the meaning of existence. So the soul is then born into the current life pattern because of that previous contact with a spiritually advanced person. The soul is born with an intent. It watches and keeps looking around, seeking for something it cannot consciously identify. It feels that something must be just around the corner, some clue which will give it the understanding it knows it lacks, the grasp of meaning which it is not present. Then something will happen that will introduce the soul to a different way of living or thinking. Some teacher takes the soul into this circle of influence. Some book seems to contain the signposts for which the seeking was probing, and a circumstance is presented which can alter the pathway. That reminds me of the part in the Matrix movie when Morpheus calls him on the phone, or Trinity, I think, and asks some questions. Here, however, is the test of discernment, of the inner recognition of truth. There are many false teachers upon the earth in the present day, many so-called gurus and sages who hold out a certain philosophy of living and acting. These many may attract the new seeker for a time, but if the teachings are not fully in tune with the higher truths, or if the teacher himself does not behave in accordance with the philosophy he proclaims, brothers, this is a big one, then the seeker is expected to see the dichotomy and to become aware that perhaps this mode of thought is only a halfway house of some sort, a way station on the path to a better and higher wisdom. Many souls do not recognize the trap into which they have fallen. They embrace the teachings, join the movement, and become devotees of their supposed master, defending him against all attack by those who have become delusioned, often cutting themselves off from family and former friends, never realizing that any movement that produces division, coldness, and estrangement between human beings, even though it does not openly espouse these attitudes, must be impaired in some way. There are thousands of such movements now on earth which fall into this category. Of course, there always have been the regular ones around, also those whose man-made doctrines have obscured the true original teachings. Because of the cosmic law governing the operations of these testing factors, we are not permitted to go about naming such groups, teachers, or movements, nor do I have any desire to do so. However, I can and will list the kinds of teachings and activity which identify such forces, and the reader can form his own conclusions as he examines the various movements which are now on the earth, which you will find are almost all of them. I would wish to place in capitals and underline these items, but will trust you to pay attention. So with that being said, I'm going to finish off this chapter in another part. So part 16, it's a long chapter. And before I do, I'm going to let you know what we're going to get into in this chapter. It's wonderful teachings. Seeing through the sham. Don't miss the point, Sowing confusion and dissension, and Christ's teachings showed the way. More on misleading teachings. Nuclear war could damage fabric of space, and direct intervention very costly. We're going to talk about the law of economy of energy down there at the bottom paragraph. You can destroy the gremlins, those little negative energies that kind of possess certain computers or even cars and things like that. Possession, we're going to get into. And that's going to finish off that chapter. We're going to move on to chapter 9, and it's going to start off with trials along the path, sexual misadventure, and money. So with that being said, may this episode bring you enlightenment, and may you study these words. I have to read these many times to understand them on different levels. So I hope you have a wonderful day. Please press that like button and subscribe, and even share this video with others of like-minded. And with that being said, this is Spaceman 2.0 with the Phoenix Truth Rising show, and may you follow the red road, the red path of truth back home. Okay, that's what the native Indians call it, the red road. Don't mistake it for the communists that are red. And that's a whole other story with the Bolsheviks and 1917 and how they took over. So may this help you wake up so that you can live and be free. Spaceman 2.0, and out.